That mic is cutting out on me, and so I'm going to use the pulpit mic today. Benjamin, are you good? All right. Benjamin has been stepping up, and he loves technology, so he's kind of been stepping in. And Barb was really enthused when she heard that he would probably be here today, because it gave her the opportunity to spend time and not have to worry about whether or not we were running stuff. So you may sit around and wonder, why is it that Tom brings up moms and starts handing out hot chocolate to the moms and starts thinking about that, or starts talking about that when he's introducing a message? I'll get there. It may be a little circuitous, but we'll get there. I promise it won't be really long, though. I know it's Christmas Day, and we've all got lots of family stuff that we want to do. So it had to have been just before Halloween. Yes, it is started just before Halloween these days, when I heard the first of the Christmas hymns on the radio. And one of the very earliest songs I heard on the radio is a song that is rapidly becoming sort of a big Christmas hit. It's not maybe a classic yet, but it's headed that way. And it's a song called "These Christmas Shoes." It's was put out by a group called New Song, and it's one that a lot of people are familiar with. I think most of you have probably heard it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the lyrics, but the story is simply about a guy who's at a store, and he sees a kid trying to buy some shoes, and the story gets related that he wants to buy the shoes for his mom, who is in the hospital fighting a life-ending illness. And it's of vital importance to this boy because he's not sure how much longer his mom's going to live. And it's an interesting song to me because it approaches the idea of Christmas from a different angle. It presents that, hey, maybe we get caught up in the wrong things when we're thinking about Christmas. But one of the real reasons it's cool to me is because it reminds me of another song. It is a much older song, and this is a song from, I'm not entirely sure who wrote the song, but I know who sang it. In fact, I know two of the guys who really made it popular, and they go by the names of C.W. McCall and Red Sovine. Now, children, you don't have to participate. If you know the names C.W. McCall or Red Sovine, will you raise your hand? How many? I see one, and it's not actually one of the older people in the building. Only one. C.W. McCall and Red Sovine were American storytellers. They would be classified in the folk music industry, but they were more storytellers. And in the 1970s, C.W. McCall made famous this song, "Roses for Mama." And as a kid, I always had to listen to kind of the not normal music. I didn't listen to pop, and American folk music is something that I listened to a lot. I actually still have the cassette tape of C.W. McCall on which I have the song "Roses for Mama." I have it because it's a difficult album to find. And I'm going to read a little bit from the song "Roses for Mama," which actually is a spoken word song. You never hear it sung. It's read. And it goes, "Well, I had 2 weeks vacation coming, so I thought I'd drive down to Florida. Spend some time with an old friend, date a few girls, make a few parties, and just kind of live it up again. So I packed up my car, and then I called my mom in Tennessee and told her what I planned to do. She said, 'Son, are you coming by?' And I said, 'Mom, I'm really pushed for time, but I'll see you in a week or two.' And I was driving through this little town in Georgia when I remembered today's Mama's birthday. Well, I thought I'll just stop and wire some flowers. Shouldn't take too long, then I'll be on my way. So I walked in a flower shop, and the first thing I saw was this little boy with his eyes full of tears. I said, 'What's wrong, son?' He said, 'Mama loves roses, and today's her birthday, and I haven't seen her in almost a year. He said, I live with Grandma now, but I promised Mama some roses because I talk to her all the time, and I wanted to give her 5 because that's how old I am. But the lady said I couldn't buy them with just a dime. Well, the little fellow's story kind of touched my heart, so I told the lady to give him what he wanted and charge it to me. Then I told her I needed to wire 12 roses to my mama up in Chapel Hill, Tennessee. I looked around and the little boy was gone, but all of a sudden the door flew open and he come running back in and he said, Mister, I forgot to thank you for the roses. He smiled, shook my hand, and ran back out again. Well, I started on out of town and I was feeling real proud of myself for thinking of my mama and really caring. When I looked out the window and I saw that same little boy kneeling by a grave in an old cemetery. I stopped my car and walked over to where the little boy was kneeling, and he smiled up at me and said, This is where my mama stays. She says she sure does thank you for these pretty roses. Well, that's when I had to walk away. And I drove straight back to the flower shop, and I said, Lady, have you sent those flowers to Tennessee? She said, No, not yet. I said, Well, never mind. I'll just take them back with me. So, I sometimes wondered when I listened to that song how Red Sovine or C.W. McCall could get through it without just getting broke up. Because if they really thought about it, it's a touching song. And to me, it's a little stronger than the idea of These Christmas Shoes, which I like. I do like New Song, and I like their Christmas song. But Roses for Mama is the one that always that's what it brings me back to. And at the risk of getting a phone call from my mother today, because she does watch these. Somebody said when I said we have to record the message, my mom does watch them every week. She leaves messages and comments because she watches the ones we do. I wanted to look a little bit at These Christmas Shoes and Roses for Mama. Because confession, my mom, anyone wants to call my mom, she will confirm it for you. I'm a little bit too much like the son in Roses for Mama. My mom will tell you she doesn't hear from me enough. She probably wouldn't object if I called her every day, but she would probably like it if I called her every week. And she will let me know if I don't get in touch with her often enough. But at Christmas time, we listen to the song, These Christmas Shoes, and we think about our parents, and we think about, what does Christmas really mean? And I listen to Roses for Mama, and I think, I need to make sure I get in touch with my mom more frequently than on her birthday. And then the rest of the day moves on, and the rest of the week moves on, and, I get to Sunday, and I haven't called my mom, and I get to the next week, and I haven't called my mom. And I find myself thinking, I need to get in touch with her. Pastor Jim last night, I thought it was really fitting when in the Christmas message, Pastor Jim talked about, we have our baby Jesus here, and we have this message that we share in Advent, and we talk about the coming of the newborn King. And on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, we get together and we celebrate, we sing all these awesome songs. And then New Year's Day hits, and suddenly everything that we've been thinking about is gone. We're not thinking about the praise and the worship of Jesus. We're not thinking about that newborn baby. We're not thinking about, what Jesus offered us and what he meant for us. Maybe till Easter. We hit Easter and we start thinking about Jesus on the cross, and suddenly it's important again. And I start to see this comparison. Last night, knowing what I was going to talk about today, last night I was talking with Kathy, and we were talking about church today, and I was trying to get a feel for, who's going to be here? How many people are actually going to be in the pews? And I was, are you guys going to be here tomorrow? And she said, I'm not sure. And the reason was really important because she said how happy she was to have her daughter and grandson in church with her today. And she said, I know that that's important for other mothers, so they were going to go out of their way and make sure that they could go to church with George's mom. Now, it didn't quite work out because she went to church last night, like many of us did, and she was already at church when they stopped by, so she didn't have to worry about church this morning. But they went out of their way. It's important. And she made that connection. She said, I know how important it is to me, and I want to make sure that George's mom gets that same feeling and respect and love. We know how we should be respecting our parents. We just sometimes fall short of it. Now, we don't have to rely. These songs are awesome. They're great for being a reminder, a gentle nudge, sometimes a swift kick in the head to remind us, but we don't have to do that. We have other examples in the Bible that we can turn to. You know, this is what's supposed to guide our lives, right? Songs are good, but we don't base our lives off of a song. We do, however, take the Bible and say, this is the Word of God, and this is what guides our lives. And so we have some things. Fortunately, one of them is in Proverbs, and it's always easy to find Proverbs because you just open the Bible and you'll hit it. And in Proverbs 31, if you've ever read through it, and I'm not going to read all of Proverbs 31, but Proverbs 31 is advice to a king. It's advice to King Lemuel, referencing his mother. And it talks about the wife, the capable wife. But we understand that part of being a wife goes to motherhood. And if you want to read Proverbs 31, it is all about wives and mothers. And it talks about how much they do and how important they are and how vital they are to our lives. Our mothers shape who we are. They are an impact on who we are, and that's something that's deserving of respect. But I want to look more at the New Testament and the example. Since we have Mary here with the baby Jesus, I'm going to look at John chapter 2, which is early, very early, in fact, before his ministry actually began. In John chapter 2, Jesus is at the wedding feast at Cana, and Mary plays a vital role in the developing ministry of Jesus. And in John chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, we read about Jesus at the wedding feast. When the wine had given out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They are out of wine." "You must not tell me what to do," Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." Mary stepped up and said, "Hey, there's a problem." And I've used this verse before, I've talked about it, and I think it's vitally important that we think about it. Jesus was not yet ready to enter into his ministry, but his mother was there, saw the need, knew what he could do, and she pointed it out. I think the most important part of that story isn't that Mary highlighted something, it's that Jesus was obedient to it. Despite the fact that he said, "My time has not yet come, it is not time for me to enter into that ministry," he turned around and he addressed the issue that his mother had pointed out. In all that we read, we know that Jesus was obedient to Mary and Joseph. He was the son that he should be, and he has set the example for us as what the son should be. And if we continue on in John and we look at chapter 19, which is the other end of the ministry of Jesus, now, rather than being at the beginning of his ministry, Jesus is hanging on a cross. And in John chapter 19, verses 29 and 30, we see just how dedicated a son Jesus is. And I'm going to look at 27, verses 26 and 27, not 28, 29 and 30. Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing there, so he said to his mother, "Here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time, the disciple took her to live in his home. So Jesus, crucified, hanging on a cross, suffering the pain and agony of all that he has been through, looks down and he sees his mother and he says, John, take care of my mother. She's your mother now. And he looks at his mother and says, Mom, here's your son. I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be at your side to take care of you, but John will. That's how important Mary was. That's how important the mother was to Jesus. Mary was a central figure in the life of Jesus. She was central as the mother. And last night I heard a story, a way of tying it together I'd never really thought of. At Mass last night, the pastor at St. Pius, Father Tom, talked about Adam and Eve. Because you want to talk about, we're going to go way back. Now we're going all the way back to the very beginning. And Adam and Eve, we know, introduced sin to the world through the eating of the forbidden fruit. But at the time, God, faced with the serpent, says, I'm going to create enmity between you and her, and between your offspring and her, and eventually her offspring will crush your offspring. And Father Tom tied that to Mary, because Mary, through the birth of Jesus, presented the opportunity for the defeat of death. Adam and Eve, through their sin, introduced death to the world, and Mary, through her sacrifice and her obedience to God, introduced Jesus to the world, and Jesus eventually died on the cross to defeat death and sin. So it's an interesting way of tying it all together. Like I said, last night Pastor Jim addressed the fact that so much of what we hear and see at this Christmas season, we forget. We don't necessarily continue to hold the Jesus at that high a level in our lives. We move on to other things. We do other things. We get busy. Just like I said with my mom, I a lot of times will get caught up in other things. I'm being a parent, and I forget that there's another parent out there, and that there's a mom who would love to hear from me. So it's not a New Year's resolution. It's not New Year's yet, but it is one of those self-confession times. It's one of those, what I point out, that, hey, there's room for growth in my life, and it's something that I probably have to pay attention to, and I need to walk out of here today, not think, well, okay, great, I gave a cool message. I said something about my mom. She's going to see this, like I said. She will see this, and she will beat me. Long distance, through the phone. She will probably pull her husband in, Art, and Art will see it, and Art will make sure to, hey, remember that message you gave in December? You forgot all about it already? And hopefully bring it to me. These Christmas Shoes is an awesome song from the group New Song. It helps us to think about what's important at Christmas. Roses for Mama is a song that I think is important for helping us to remember our moms. But at the end of the day, what's most important is that we think about how we take things like the birth of Jesus and carry it into January and February and March, so that by Easter it's not something we've long forgotten, but it's something we're continuing to remember and continuing to praise and worship, so that we can take and tie the birth of Jesus to the death of Jesus and make it something that we can apply to our daily lives and remember each and every day as we walk out. Let's finish with prayer. Part of it will be to pray that my mom doesn't hurt me too badly. Heavenly Father, as Pastor Jim mentioned, as I try and stress again today, it's all too frequent that we move on from Christmas rather than carry Christmas into the new year. It's so easy in our lives to get caught up in things We all have work, we have family commitments, we have, activities that we want to do, we have trips we want to take. So many things in our lives distract us from the things that we should hold dear. We look today at two different things. We look at our moms. We look at how easy it is to get caught up in our own lives and forget about the impact that it might have on others. Some of us are awesome at just noticing our moms and doing everything we can to pay attention and show that love and cherished attitude that we should towards our parents. Some of us aren't as good at it. Some of us let things slip by. We let things go by, and we know that hurts, and we sometimes fail to even address it. And then we look at the birth of Jesus. It's the cause for all celebration. It's a gift that none of us deserves, but all of us benefit from. It's a gift that we can all receive regardless of merit. We thank you for that, but we ask that you bless us with the wisdom to think about how to bring Jesus out of Christmas and into the rest of our lives. Help us to walk out of here today and walk out of 2016 and walk through each month with Jesus in our hearts and Jesus on our lips and Jesus something we're willing to talk about and share, and to reach out and touch the lives of others who might not have benefited from the message that he has. We know that the angels brought good news of great joy, and our job, as given by Jesus, is to share that with others. So help us to do that, and help us to make Christmas something that we celebrate all year round through the life that we lead and the things that we do. In your name we pray.